You think erasing them without regret makes you cold, but it doesn't. It makes you clear. It makes you finally honest about what you had to survive to get to this point. Because you didn't wake up one morning and decide a person meant nothing. You woke up after 1,000 small disappointments, 1,000 moments where you were left holding the emotional weight alone. 1,000 times you tried to be understood and ended up explaining yourself to someone who only listened long enough to escape. Erasing them isn't cruelty, it's clarity. You didn't stop caring, you stopped bleeding. And I need you to let that sentence sink into your chest, because you have been trained to confuse suffering with love. You have been trained to believe that if it hurts, it means it mattered. You have been trained to believe that if you can't let go, it means you were loyal. You have been trained to believe that if you feel regret, it means your heart was real. But regret is not proof of love. Regret is proof you kept carrying what was never meant to be carried by one person. You carried the hope. You carried the patience. You carried the second chances. You carried the benefit of the doubt. You carried the late-night overthinking, the stomach-dropping silence, the anxiety that hit you when you saw your phone light up, the relief when they returned, and the panic when they pulled away again. You carried the entire emotional ecosystem of that connection, and they carried a door they could leave through whenever it got too real. So no, erasing them is not you becoming heartless. It is you becoming finished with the cycle. Because there's a moment in every strong person's story where the heart doesn't harden, it simply gets tired of being used as a doormat. There's a moment where you realize you are not healing. You are rehearsing the pain. Rereading old messages, checking their profile, replaying conversations, imagining what you should have said, imagining what you'll say if they come back. That mental loop feels like love, but it's actually self-harm in slow motion, because you keep reopening the wound to see if it finally closes. And clarity is when you stop doing that. Clarity is when you say, I refuse to bleed for someone who would not stay with me in truth. Clarity is when you accept that a person can be meaningful and still be unsafe for your peace. Clarity is when you understand that missing someone does not mean you should return. Clarity is when you admit, I kept calling it love, but it felt like anxiety, and love is not supposed to feel like panic. Erasing them isn't a punishment, it's a boundary. It's you finally saying, you don't get access to my mind anymore. You don't get to live rent-free in my chest. You don't get to keep pulling emotional strings from a distance. You don't get to keep showing up only when it's convenient and disappearing when it requires accountability. You don't get to keep triggering my nervous system and calling it misunderstanding. You don't get to keep my heart as a backup plan. And I know there's still a soft part of you that wonders if you're being too harsh. Because you have empathy, and empathy is beautiful. But empathy without boundaries becomes self-betrayal. Empathy is what made you understand their fear. Empathy is what made you excuse their distance. Empathy is what made you wait. Empathy is what made you believe that if you were patient enough, safe enough, loving enough, they would finally show up consistently. But listen to me. Your empathy was never the problem. Your lack of protection was. You kept giving love to someone who kept giving you uncertainty. You kept giving chances to someone who kept giving excuses. You kept giving closeness to someone who panicked at closeness. You kept offering peace to someone who was addicted to emotional escape. And over time, that doesn't just hurt your heart, it exhausts your body. It trains your nervous system to live on edge. It teaches you to anticipate abandonment. It turns your life into a waiting room. So when you finally erase them, your nervous system breathes. That breath, that relief, that quiet feeling of, I don't care anymore the way I used to, That is not coldness. That is recovery. Because caring used to cost you your sleep. Caring used to cost you your appetite. Caring used to cost you your focus. Caring used to cost you your dignity, because you would reach out one more time, explain one more time, forgive one more time. Caring used to cost you your self-respect, because you kept accepting crumbs and calling it connection. And now, you are choosing a different cost. You're choosing the cost of letting go, which feels like grief at first, but becomes peace later. Erasing them doesn't mean you deny what was real. It doesn't mean you pretend you didn't love. It means you stop letting the past hold your future hostage. It means you stop using your energy to keep a ghost alive. It means you stop romanticizing a person's potential while ignoring their pattern. It means you stop chasing the version of them that appeared only when you were leaving. And let's be honest, that version was never sustainable. That version was a moment, not a foundation. That version was panic, not commitment. That version was fear of losing you, not the courage to keep you. So here is the truth you need to hold on to. You are not erasing them because you are angry. You are erasing them because you are awake. You're awake to what it cost you. You're awake to how much you abandoned yourself trying to hold on to them. You're awake to the way your life got smaller. You're awake to the way your joy got delayed. You're awake to the way your love got turned into a negotiation. And you're done negotiating. You are allowed to close the door without a final conversation. You are allowed to move on without their apology. You are allowed to stop caring without feeling guilty. You are allowed to detach without explaining yourself. You are allowed to choose peace even if someone calls you cold. Because what they call cold is usually just your boundaries. And your boundaries are the language of your self-respect. So if you need a sentence to repeat when your heart tries to pull you back into the cycle, repeat this. I didn't stop caring. I stopped bleeding. I didn't erase them out of cruelty. I erased them out of clarity. I didn't lose love. I removed access. And now, you keep going. Not to prove anything. Not to punish anyone. But to return to yourself. To rebuild your peace. To reclaim your energy. To remember who you were before you started living in emotional suspense. Erasing them without regret is not coldness. It is freedom. You think no regret means you didn't love them enough, but that's not what it means. No regret means you finally loved yourself enough to stop returning to what was breaking you. No regret means you finally stopped confusing attachment with destiny. No regret means you finally stopped calling anxiety a connection. No regret means your heart got tired of fighting for basic peace. Your no regret is not coldness, it's recovery. It means you finally chose peace over patterns, because patterns are powerful, and they don't just live in the relationship, they live in your body. The pattern was the waiting, the guessing, the hoping, the spiraling. The pattern was the way you would feel fine, and then one late reply would ruin your whole day. The pattern was the way you kept checking your phone, like your worth was hiding inside a message. The pattern was the way you held your breath when things got quiet. Because quiet didn't feel peaceful, it felt like abandonment. And you lived inside that pattern for so long that you started thinking it was normal. You started thinking love is supposed to be uncertain. You started thinking love is supposed to make you prove yourself. You started thinking love is supposed to come in waves, warm one day, cold the next. You started thinking, if you just tried harder, if you were just softer, if you were just more patient, they would finally stay consistent. And maybe you did try harder. Maybe you did become softer. Maybe you did become patient. And maybe you lost yourself in the process. That is why no regret is recovery, because recovery is not about forgetting them. Recovery is about remembering what it cost you to keep them. Recovery is when your nervous system finally stops begging for crumbs. Recovery is when your mind finally stops rehearsing conversations that never happen. Recovery is when your heart finally stops romanticizing someone's potential while your body is screaming, "This is not safe." And I want you to hear this clearly. Peace is not boring. Peace is what your body has been praying for. But peace feels strange at first because chaos became familiar. The adrenaline of inconsistency became normal. The push and pull became your routine. The almost became your addiction. Almost loved, almost chosen, almost prioritized, almost understood. And when you finally step out of that, your brain doesn't know what to do. It reaches back, not because the past was good, but because the past is known. So you start thinking, maybe I'm being too harsh. Maybe I should give one more chance. Maybe I'll regret this later. Maybe I'm cutting them off too fast. And that's when you need to understand the difference between regret and withdrawal. Withdrawal feels like longing, but it's actually your nervous system rebalancing. Withdrawal feels like missing them, but it's actually your mind detoxing from unpredictability. Withdrawal feels like guilt, but it's actually your old self trying to keep the door open, because open doors made you feel like you still had control. But you never had control. The pattern had control, and when you choose no regret, you are choosing to break the pattern, even if it hurts, even if it's lonely, even if it feels unfamiliar. Because the truth is, your healing was never going to feel like comfort at first. Healing feels like quiet. Healing feels like not reacting. Healing feels like sitting with feelings you used to escape by texting them. Healing feels like letting time pass without chasing, and that's why it takes strength. Because you are not just leaving a person, you are leaving a version of yourself that kept negotiating your worth. You are leaving a version of yourself that kept trying to earn consistency. You are leaving a version of yourself that believed love had to be fought for, even when it was hurting you. You are leaving a version of yourself that kept making excuses, not because you were weak, but because you were hopeful. So no regret is not you being heartless, it's you being done with self-abandonment. No regret is you realizing you don't have to suffer to prove you cared. No regret is you realizing you don't have to keep your heart open to someone who keeps closing theirs. No regret is you realizing that peace is not something you beg for, peace is something you protect. And I know there's a part of you that still wants to be seen by them, a part of you that wants them to realize what they lost, a part of you that wants them to feel it, a part of you that wants them to come back and say the words you deserved all along. But listen, the moment you stop needing that moment is the moment you are truly free. Because your freedom cannot depend on their awareness. Your closure cannot depend on their apology. Your peace cannot depend on their emotional maturity. If your peace depends on them changing, then you are still tied to the pattern. So here's what recovery looks like. It looks like you stop checking, even when you want to. It looks like you stop answering, even when you miss them. It looks like you stop explaining, even when your heart is full of words. It looks like you stop giving them access to the part of you that is still tender. It looks like you stop letting their inconsistency keep your nervous system in a loop. Recovery looks like you choosing yourself in small moments, choosing to sleep, choosing to eat, choosing to breathe, choosing to focus on your work, choosing to go outside, choosing to laugh with a friend, choosing to do something that brings you back to your body, choosing to build a day that doesn't revolve around whether they show up. And slowly, your brain learns a new truth. I am safe without them. I am okay without them. I can feel this pain, and still survive it. I can miss them and still not return. I can love the memory and still protect my future. That is no regret. No regret is not the absence of feeling. It's the absence of self-betrayal. It's the moment you realize you are allowed to stop hurting. You are allowed to stop waiting. You are allowed to stop hoping for a different version of the same pattern. You are allowed to choose peace, even if it makes you look cold to people who benefited from you being available. And one day, you'll look back and understand the reason you feel no regret is because you finally chose what love is actually supposed to feel like: steady, safe, mutual. You finally chose a life where your nervous system can rest. You finally chose a love that doesn't require you to bleed. So if your heart is shaking right now, if your mind is trying to pull you back, put your hand on your chest and remind yourself, this is recovery. This is not coldness. This is me choosing peace over patterns. This is me becoming free. They didn't think you could detach. They didn't think you could truly let go. They didn't think you could erase them without regret because your empathy always kept the door cracked open. Your empathy made you understand their silence. Your empathy made you excuse their distance. Your empathy made you believe their fear was a reason to stay. Your empathy made you keep translating their inconsistency into something you could forgive. Avoidance didn't expect you to detach because your empathy kept you connected. But empathy without boundaries becomes self-betrayal. And I want you to really hear that, because you have been confusing kindness with self-sacrifice. You have been confusing understanding with tolerance. You have been confusing compassion with emotional self-harm. You kept giving grace, and they kept taking space. You kept reaching, and they kept retreating. You kept trying to make love feel safe for them, while love was making you feel unsafe in your own body. That's what nobody talks about. The way an inconsistent person can turn a stable heart into an anxious one. The way a person who runs from closeness can make you chase closeness harder. The way your thoughts start looping. What did I do? What did I say? How do I fix it? How do I make them stay? And slowly, without realizing it, your empathy becomes the rope you tie around your own waist while you're trying to pull someone closer who keeps stepping backward. You weren't weak. You were loyal. You were hopeful. You were emotionally mature enough to see the human behind the behavior. You could see their wounds, the fear of intimacy, the discomfort with vulnerability, the panic when things got real. You could see that they weren't always trying to hurt you. Sometimes they were trying to protect themselves. But here's the truth that changes everything. Their wounds can be real, and your pain can still be unacceptable. And you kept forgetting that part. You kept giving them a pass because you could understand them. You kept softening your boundaries because you didn't want to be too much. You kept lowering your standards because you thought love meant patience. You kept staying emotionally available even when they were emotionally absent, because you believed your consistency could heal their inconsistency. It couldn't, because empathy is not medicine for someone who refuses accountability. Empathy is not a substitute for emotional maturity. Empathy cannot build a relationship by itself. And when you keep offering empathy to someone who won't do the work, your empathy stops being beautiful and starts being dangerous to you. It becomes self-betrayal. Self-betrayal is when you ignore your own needs to keep someone else comfortable. Self-betrayal is when you swallow your truth so they don't run. Self-betrayal is when you accept crumbs and call it love. Self-betrayal is when you keep explaining your feelings to someone who keeps disappearing. Self-betrayal is when you keep reopening the wound because you think love requires you to suffer. And you did suffer. You suffered quietly. You suffered politely. You suffered in a way that made it look like you were fine. You carried the relationship in your head, in your chest, in your daily routine. You carried the waiting. You carried the overthinking. You carried the uncertainty. You carried the emotional labor. You carried the hope that one day they would finally become steady. And then something changed, not because they changed, but because you did. You hit that moment where your body said, enough. Your nervous system said, I can't do this anymore. Your heart said, I can't keep loving like this and survive. And that is when empathy finally met boundaries. That is when the part of you that understands people stopped overpowering the part of you that protects you. That is detachment. Detachment is not hatred. Detachment is not revenge. Detachment is the decision to stop being available to what harms you. Detachment is when you stop letting your kindness become a doorway for disrespect. Detachment is when you stop explaining yourself to someone who has already shown you they don't have the capacity to hold your truth. And yes, when you detach, people like them get shocked because they are used to your empathy keeping you near. They are used to you seeing their potential and waiting for it. They are used to you forgiving the behavior because you understand the pain behind it. They are used to you staying connected even when they pull away because you believe in love. But the day you detach, the day you truly stop reaching, they feel something unfamiliar. Consequences. Not punishment, consequences. Consequences are what happen when your empathy stops rescuing someone from the discomfort of their choices. Consequences are what happen when you stop chasing, and the silence they created finally echoes back at them. Consequences are what happen when you stop being the bridge and they have to face the distance they built. And I want you to be careful here, because your old self might still want them to notice. Your old self might still want them to feel it. Your old self might still want them to regret it. But this is where your healing becomes real. You detach without needing a reaction. Because if you detach to get their attention, you're still connected. Real detachment is when your peace no longer requires their awareness. Real detachment is when you stop checking, stop waiting, stop interpreting, stop hoping. Real detachment is when your empathy stays alive, but your access is closed. That's the balance. You can understand them without returning to them. You can forgive them without giving them a doorway back into your life. You can wish them healing without sacrificing yours. You can remember the good without forgetting the damage. You can love what you felt without letting it keep hurting you. And I know part of you might feel guilty, because empathy makes you feel responsible for other people's feelings. Empathy makes you feel like you're abandoning them if you leave. Empathy makes you feel like you're harsh if you choose yourself. But choosing yourself is not harsh. It is healthy. Because the truth is, you are not responsible for carrying someone else's avoidance. You are not responsible for fixing someone's emotional immaturity. You are not responsible for teaching someone how to treat you with basic respect. Your job is to protect your heart. So if you are in that space right now, where you feel yourself detaching, where you feel yourself getting quiet, where you feel yourself losing the urge to chase, I want you to honor that. That is not you becoming cold. That is you becoming safe with yourself. Your empathy is still a gift, but now it has a gate. And that gate is called boundaries. And that is why they didn't expect you to detach, because they thought your empathy would keep you connected forever. But you finally chose the part of you that deserves protection. You finally chose the part of you that deserves peace. You finally chose yourself. The real flex is not revenge. The real flex is not a dramatic goodbye. The real flex is not posting to make them jealous, not sending a final paragraph that you hope will haunt them, not proving you're better without them. The real flex is silence, and not the silent treatment, not the childish kind, but the kind of silence that comes from self-respect. The kind of silence that comes from peace. The kind of silence that says, I don't need to argue with someone who chose to misunderstand me. I don't need to chase someone who chose to run. I don't need to prove my worth to someone who treated it like it was optional. The real flex is silence, not revenge. You don't have to prove anything. Your absence is the message. And I want you to understand why that silence is so powerful. Because it's not empty. It's full. It's full of boundaries. It's full of healing. It's full of choices you didn't make before. It's full of the part of you that finally stopped begging. It's full of the version of you that stopped reacting. Because for a long time, the connection was fueled by your reaction. They did something. You responded. They pulled away. You reached. They went quiet. You explained. They returned. You forgave. They disappeared again. You questioned yourself. The relationship became a loop, and your nervous system became the engine that kept it running. And they got comfortable in that loop, because no matter what they did, they could count on one thing: your emotional availability. But silence changes the rules. Silence breaks the loop. Silence takes your energy back. Silence is the moment you stop feeding the pattern. And listen, this isn't about punishing them. This is about protecting you. This is about refusing to keep paying for someone else's emotional immaturity with your peace. This is about refusing to keep handing your heart to someone who treats it like a place they can enter and exit whenever they feel like it. This is about refusing to keep turning yourself into a lesson that hurts, because revenge keeps you connected. Revenge keeps your mind on them. Revenge keeps your emotions circling their life. Revenge keeps you watching, waiting, plotting, hoping they notice. Revenge is still attachment, just wearing anger. Silence is freedom. Silence is you choosing to stop explaining yourself to people who already decided they don't want to understand. Silence is you deciding, I'm not doing this anymore. And I know silence can feel scary at first, because you are used to being the bridge. You are used to being the one who tries. You are used to being the one who reaches. You are used to being the one who keeps the connection alive, even when it's hurting you. So when you go silent, your heart feels like it's standing in an empty room. Your mind searches for the familiar chaos. Your body feels the withdrawal. And that's when the old you wants to break the silence, just to feel relief, just to feel connected, just to feel like you still matter. But that relief is temporary, and the pain always returns. So this is where you choose something different. You choose dignity over dopamine. You choose peace over pattern. You choose self-respect over attachment. You choose your future over the familiar pain of the past. Because silence is not the absence of love, it is the presence of boundaries. It's you saying, my heart is not a playground. My attention is not free. My energy is not unlimited. My forgiveness is not automatic. My softness is not a guarantee. Access to me is earned. And when you live like that, something in you changes. Your nervous system starts to calm. Your mind starts to clear. Your day stops revolving around them. Your thoughts stop looping. Your appetite returns. Your sleep improves. Your confidence rebuilds. Your laughter comes back. You start noticing the world again, the sunlight, the music, the small joys you forgot you deserved. That is what silence gives you. Silence gives you space to heal without being triggered by their breadcrumbs. Silence gives you space to grieve without reopening the door. Silence gives you space to remember who you are without the noise of their inconsistency. And the reason your absence is the message is because you were the one carrying the emotional weight. You were the one making it work. You were the one softening the hard moments. You were the one bridging the gaps. You were the one offering closure when there was none. You were the one translating their silence into excuses so you could keep loving them. So when you disappear, the whole system changes. And yes, they may feel it. They may wonder. They may reach out. They may test the waters. They may suddenly act like they care. But here's the part that matters. Your silence is not a strategy to get them back. Your silence is a boundary to get you back. Because the goal is not to make them regret you. The goal is to stop regretting yourself. Stop regretting the times you ignored your intuition. Stop regretting the times you begged. Stop regretting the times you accepted crumbs. Stop regretting the times you abandoned yourself to keep someone close. Silence is you refusing to abandon yourself again. And if you're worried that silence makes you look cruel, remember this. You tried communication. You tried understanding. You tried patience. You tried kindness. You tried giving chances. And if they still kept choosing avoidance, then silence is not cruelty. Silence is the natural consequence of your healing. You do not owe endless access to someone who kept hurting you. You do not owe endless explanations to someone who kept leaving. You do not owe your peace to someone who never protected it. So when you go silent with love for yourself, not with bitterness, with clarity, not with hatred, with boundaries, not with a need to be noticed, with a decision to be free. And if your heart gets weak, if you feel the urge to break the silence, put your hand on your chest and remind yourself, I am not silent to punish them. I am silent to protect me. I am not disappearing to be dramatic. I am disappearing to heal. My absence is not a game. It is my boundary. Because the real flex is not revenge. The real flex is silence. And silence is how you come back to yourself. When you erase them, you don't erase love. You erase access. And I need you to understand the difference, because for so long, you've been trained to believe that if you truly love someone, you must always be available, always forgiving, always reachable, always willing to explain, always willing to try again. But that isn't love. That is abandonment of self disguised as loyalty. When you erase them, you don't erase love. You erase access. And access is earned, not owed. Because love can be real and still not be safe. Love can be intense and still not be healthy. Love can be sincere and still be one-sided. And what you are doing right now is not denying what you felt. You are simply refusing to keep paying the price for it. You are refusing to keep letting someone's inconsistency live inside your daily life. You are refusing to keep giving front-row access to your mind, your emotions, your peace, your attention, your softness, when they treated it like it was endless. You are not deleting your heart. You are protecting it. And I know part of you feels guilty because you remember the good moments. You remember the laughter. You remember the way it felt when things were warm. You remember how hopeful you were, how you believed, how you imagined a future. And that's what makes it hard, because you're not erasing a stranger. You're erasing a connection that once mattered to you. You're erasing the version of them you wanted them to be. You're erasing the story you were building in your mind. But listen, you can honor what you felt without continuing to suffer for it. Erasing access is not disrespect, it is discernment. Because access is a privilege, and privileges require responsibility. If someone wants access to your heart, they must handle it with care. If someone wants access to your energy, they must show up consistently. If someone wants access to your love, they must respect your boundaries. If someone wants access to your life, they must be emotionally present, not emotionally absent, not half in, not hot and cold, not here when it benefits them and gone when it requires accountability. And if they didn't do that, then access must be removed. Not as punishment, but as protection. Because what happens when you keep giving access to the wrong person is this: your nervous system never rests. Your mind stays in a loop. Your mood depends on their behavior. Your peace becomes fragile. You start living in emotional suspense, waiting for the next text, the next apology, the next "I miss you," the next breadcrumb that keeps you attached. And you call it love, but your body calls it stress. So, erasing access is how you return to yourself. It's you saying, "I am not going to be emotionally available to someone who keeps emotionally abandoning me. I am not going to keep my door open for someone who keeps slamming it. I am not going to keep offering softness to someone who uses it as a place to rest before they disappear again. I am not going to keep giving you the privilege of my attention while you treat my feelings like an inconvenience." And here is the most important part. Removing access doesn't require anger. It requires clarity. Because anger can fade, but clarity stays. Clarity is knowing what the pattern did to you. Clarity is knowing how much you gave. Clarity is knowing how much you tolerated. Clarity is knowing that you deserve love that feels steady. Clarity is knowing you don't need to keep proving your worth to someone who keeps questioning it. Clarity is knowing you don't need to keep explaining basic respect. And yes, removing access will feel like grief. It will feel like withdrawal. It will feel like loneliness at first, because you are not just leaving a person. You are leaving a habit. You are leaving a routine. You are leaving a story your mind kept rehearsing. You are leaving the familiar chaos. And the familiar chaos will try to seduce you back. It will whisper, "Maybe you're overreacting. Maybe it wasn't that bad. Maybe they'll change. Maybe you should just check. Maybe you should just reply." But here is what you must remember in that moment. The urge to go back is not proof it was good. It is proof you were attached. And attachment is not always love. Sometimes attachment is a nervous system that got addicted to unpredictability. So you breathe, you pause, you choose yourself again. You remind yourself that access is not something you beg people to value. Access is something you control. You control who gets to reach you. You control who gets to speak to you. You control who gets to know your life. You control who gets the privilege of your softness. You control who gets your time. And that control is not arrogance, it is self-respect. Self-respect is you refusing to be available to disrespect. Self-respect is you refusing to be an option. Self-respect is you refusing to be someone's emotional convenience. Self-respect is you refusing to be the person they return to when they're lonely, while they keep leaving when you need consistency. And I know, part of you wants them to notice the absence. Part of you wants them to feel the loss. Part of you wants them to regret it. But listen to me. Removing access is not a strategy to get a reaction. It is a decision to get your life back. Because the moment you stop needing them to feel it, you win. The moment your peace no longer depends on their awareness, you are free. The moment you stop waiting for their apology to validate your pain, you heal. So you erase access with dignity. You erase access with quiet strength. You erase access without drama, without announcements, without speeches, without revenge. Not because you're trying to look powerful, but because you are finally choosing power over pain. And in time, you will feel it, the way your mind gets quieter, the way your day feels lighter, the way your chest loosens, the way your appetite returns, the way your sleep improves, the way you stop thinking about them every hour, the way you start thinking about yourself again, your goals, your peace, your future. That is what happens when you erase access. You don't erase love. You erase the bleeding. You don't erase the memories. You erase the doorway that kept letting the same pain re-enter your life. You don't become heartless. You become healed. And if your heart ever doubts you, if you ever feel guilty for choosing yourself, remind yourself of this truth. Access is earned, not owed. And you are allowed to protect what is sacred: your peace, your dignity, your heart.